I already don't know what I'm titling this yet, but it's basically going to be based off some of the lies that my narcissistic dad used to tell, or probably still does tell. I don't have a relationship with him anymore. Yeah, if I sat here and told every single lie, we'd literally be here for like 100 years. I swear, he was the biggest lie you could have ever met. So these are just going to be like big lies, just to like show and talk about how extreme some of the lies would get. I still don't know all of the lies. I'm sure that there were a lot of lies about me, and other family members that I was unaware of. But yeah, I'll get to the lies that my narcissistic dad used to tell other people. And yes, I am in my pajamas because I couldn't be bothered to get changed yet. Okay, so when I was a teenager, my dad had told me, he was like, "Oh, can you get my glasses out of the, what was it called? Like the glove compartment. That's the thing, the glove compartment in the car." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." And it was really weird because he was like right next to me. There was loads of room, and my dad was such a, like, he would get angry if things weren't done straight away. So a lot of the time he would just do them, even if it like was like quite triggering. It was sort of, oh god, like you, yeah. So it was weird because usually he would just be like, and like snatch them and get them out himself, or whatever it was he needed. So the fact that he even asked me when he wasn't doing anything, it wasn't like he was busy, it wasn't like he was driving yet. It was like he was waiting for my reaction. So straight away I was like, he's up to something, because that's what my dad was like. He was always up to something. He was always lying. I'd known this since I was a child. And there were just loads of tablets and literally nothing else. And it was clear there was like an indication of like, I could top myself, I could end my life. And it wasn't believable at all. The fact that he asked me to do that, when, like, if anyone knew his personality, he wouldn't have asked me to do that. He also, like, that was always such a messy thing in his car. It always had so much stuff, and there was literally nothing else. In fact, it almost looked like the glove compartment, glove box, whatever it's called, had been like hoovered. It was that clean. So it was like, you need to see this. And also, if he had left that there, sure, like, and he actually was going to end his life, he would have not wanted his teenage daughter to risk seeing it. So you would have thought he'd be like, "Oh, I'll sneakily look, or whatever, to stop her getting upset potentially, and being like, oh, you're gonna try and kill yourself." And I just responded and went, "Oh, they're not in there." Because when my dad does this stuff, he wants a big response. He wants you to be like, "Oh my gosh, no." And at this point, he'd lied so much. I'm going to get into that in a bit. That he'd lied so much that it was sort of like, I know this isn't true. Before I already found out other things that proved that it wasn't true even more. Yeah, and he was just literally watching to see how I would react, to be like, let's make this about me, even though it was already about him. Life was always about him. So yeah. And then a few years after that, I think I had told my mum no, not a few years after, like maybe a year after I told my mum. But then a few years after that, my mum, sorry, my voice is again. My mum was like, oh, like she didn't say anything at this point, but she was like, oh, you know. um, and then a few years later, I keep trying to get back to this point. I'm an awful storyteller. My brother had the exact same experience, and he told my mum. That's how I knew. Like, me and my brother didn't speak. Part of narcissistic families, it's very common, but we didn't speak, so he wouldn't have known what I went through. My mum wouldn't have told him, and it was the exact same story. Like, the glove compartment is always messy. He was known for being like quite like a messy dude, and then all of a sudden it's all cleaned out. My brother opens it probably to get his glasses again. I don't know what else would be so common that he might need it, but my dad, I don't know if he would have needed those glasses for, because he needed them for reading, so I don't know why he was wearing them for driving. I don't know enough about glasses. I need glasses, but for the opposite thing. But yeah, and that was like we both, me, my mum, and my brother were all like, and my brother didn't say anything to him. He sort of reacted the same, almost sort of like, oh, I don't really want to give him a reaction. So my brother, who he was very much the golden child, he believed my dad was so much like rubbish for years. Yet he didn't believe this. So it makes me think my brother actually didn't believe my dad as much as he even made out to himself that he did, right? And it wasn't until this, my mum was telling me about it, and she was just like, oh my god, that's so strange. And she was like, I mean, I didn't really know how to say this, but he done this to me before. And I was like, before when? Before he done it to me? And she was like, yeah, he done it to me like years ago, like when they, I can't quite remember. I don't know if it was when they started dating, or when me and my brother were kids and we were really young. But he had done the exact same thing. All of the clutter, all of the junk, all of the, dirtiness out of the glove compartment, and it was just the tablets there, all looking very neat, like very bold to make a statement. And so this was years and years apart. When he done this to me, I was like, I don't know, 15, 16. When he done it to my brother, that must have been like 2 or 3 years after. When he done it to my mum and my dad split up when I was like around 10 or 11, just to give you an idea. When he did it to my mum, like, we must have been young, or we might not have even existed. I can't remember, to be honest, but that was like a long time ago. So he's been doing this for a while, and I have a lot of suspicions that he's been doing this with a lot of other partners, because a lot of other partners have spoken to me like, I'm being so cruel, and like, you'd think I'd be nicer because of what he's going through. What was he going through? He would just, yeah, I don't no one really ever knew. And I think a lot of his partners probably at the time or afterwards looked back and was like, that was a bit weird, and they would have realized that he's the messy person. Why is it all cleaned out just for tablets? And this is the thing as well, if you were planning to end your own life, would you purposely want someone to find that? Some people might, because I guess attention seeking could be like a form of trying to get help if you're suicidal. But you wouldn't do it with your own kids, when they're kids. Well, I wasn't a kid, I was a teenager, but yeah. And then fast forward to like 2018. This was like I think this was the year that I cut him off, and I'd called him and I was like, hey, do you want to should we see each other? Do you want to meet up? You know, I've not seen you in a while. It would be nice to see you. Things that I feel like most dads would love to hear from their teenage kids. And this is what was always really strange, is I made such an effort with my dad, yet he would act so annoyed, like, ugh. And it'd be like, most teenagers don't do this. Like, most dads would be over the moon that their kids like want to spend time with them, want to see them. But yeah, mine wasn't. And he was really angry for some reason. I don't know if he'd had an argument, or I mean, narcissists do just get angry randomly, don't they? So and then he just started having a go at me, and he was like, oh, you made me, you're the reason I tried to kill myself. This is years after I saw the tablets, and it was almost like he was trying to make out that he recently tried to kill himself. Again, I feel like this was a thing he was constantly saying to someone. Like, if he wasn't saying it to me, it would be one of his latest girlfriends or one of his friends or someone he's just met, or it would just be constant, I reckon. Just off the vibes people gave me, off of what we've been through. And it was just a weird way to like answer and talk to your daughter when she wants to spend time with you. And it's sort of like, what? I made you feel suicidal because I wanted to see you when I've not seen you for a few weeks. Like, you don't have to. Like, I couldn't drive. He would have had to come to me, so it was all up to him. And very rarely he couldn't be bothered to see me, or couldn't be bothered to see me on my own. He'd always have his latest girlfriend. So yeah, it came out of nowhere. So it was almost like he was just like, I'm angry, I need attention. And I just had enough of it, because every time I spoke to him, it was getting to the point where it was just like ridiculous things were being said, and it was like, I just called for a normal conversation. I'm not sure how we got here. And yeah, and then when I tried to bring it up again, he was like, yeah, let's not talk about that. So yeah, that's just the one thing. I feel like there's probably more stuff that I can't remember at this time as well, but yeah, it is very obvious. He made out to people, you know, like girlfriends and that he was attempting when he wasn't. Okay, so that's the first one. I wrote them down because you have to go into a lot of stories to explain this sometimes, I think. And then it would just like distract me. So I had to write the different ones down to remind myself where I was going and what points I wanted to make. My dad, when they split up, I don't know, how old was I? 10, 11, 12, honestly, I can't really remember. It was one of those 3 years. They were always arguing, so it was really hard to know. And me and my brother didn't quite know what was going on at the time, or I didn't at least. My whole childhood, I thought they were like always like about to break up, and then they wouldn't. So it was very confusing. But one day, me and my brother were in the car, and my dad just sort of said really sad, like he was already feeling sorry for himself, and he was, oh, your mum cheated on me, or like he said it like that. And it was, I mean, even that I think is very strange. Like, I don't know if that's how I would go about saying that about the person I have kids with. Like, I would try to act differently about it, but that's just me. I wouldn't be like, but this is about me. I feel like I would be like, this is probably going to come as a shock for the kids as well. And me and my mum moved out not long after that. But what I didn't realise, I mean, I think I did, there was a lot going on at the time. So, and I don't have much memory of that time because my dad was really bad with me. Like, I mean, if you have a narcissistic parent, you know what I mean. Yeah, and it was like, we moved out, and for years he was like letting me believe that my mum had cheated on him. And my brother believed this as well. We both did. And it wasn't until like years later that me and my mum started just talking about how weird my dad was and stuff, because she was very, like, she didn't want to, you know, upset me with talking about it, even though weird things were obvious. But yeah, and it wasn't until I sort of, when I got a lot older and I started talking about how bad he was still being with me, that she was speaking about this. But I can't remember. I think I actually held off saying about what my dad said to me and my brother because I just didn't want to upset my mum, because obviously that's not going to be something nice to hear, that your kids have been told in that way as well. Also, I'm not sure it should be something kids hear, or they don't hear it that way anyway. And she was like, I didn't cheat on him. And it was really strange, like the way my dad really, like, he would, I feel like, I can't, again, it's hard to say because I can't really remember, but it was kind of obvious that my dad would make out to everyone. My mum cheated, she was evil, blah, 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 you know. And you'd think that she was sleeping with other people, right? You'd think she's sleeping with people, and that's how they cheated on each other. That's not what happened. They split up, but they had to still live in the same house, because basically we owned another house, but there were renters in there. So me and my mum couldn't just get away, and they had split up. And I think this is why it was so confusing, because I was like quite young, and I didn't really know what was going on. And my parents never really spoke or got on that much too much anyway, so I was just sort of like, this is normal. I wasn't really sure if they were breaking up or not. And but around this time, I don't know if they had told me or not, to be honest. I have no idea. But she had just gone for a drink with someone after they had split up. She just went for a drink with them, and my dad literally let everyone believe she was like this massive, you know, when c.leighx goes, I didn't become a little bit of a slag, I became a total slag, or something like that. That's what he made my mum out to be like, and that wasn't the case. Which is, it's so funny as well, because when I went on holiday with him a few years later, he had a long-term girlfriend. I don't know if you could call it long-term. They had been together for like, I don't know, longer than some of his girlfriends anyway. Maybe a year. I'm not sure, to be honest. And he had been with her, and the holiday was horrible. It's a completely different story, but the holiday was horrible. He was horrible to me the entire time, and was talking like he was dad of the year to everyone else. But that's a different story, and I'm gonna get distracted. So I'm gonna focus on the part of the story that is the important part. He went out for a drink with these two girls that he was literally following around the whole holiday. It was quite embarrassing. We didn't know these women. Yeah, when I said girls, I meant women. Yeah, when we arrived, we didn't know them. They were strangers and they were nice. And then because they were sort of nice, he was just like, oh, I'll follow them for the whole holiday now and ignore my daughter, which is part of the reason why it was horrible for me. again, not going into that right now. He went for a drink with them. There was indications that a kiss or something might have happened as well, so I don't really know. And he added these girls on Facebook, and his partner was like, so I think maybe there was other stuff that I don't know about. I didn't really know this partner very well, but she was like calling him up, and she was just like, no, I want you gone, because he added these girls on Facebook, so I can only assume what he's been like with her. You know, to make her be like that, it's almost like that was the final straw, and she'd been, you know, caught him messaging people and all this and that. So I just thought that was so funny how when my mum went for a drink, when they had split up, he thought that was cheating. And even when I confronted him and I was like, but she didn't cheat, you weren't together and she went for a drink with someone, and he was like, yeah, but that's cheating. But when he does it, it's not. It is. If you consider that cheating, it's cheating when you do it as well. So yeah, I've got the him faking suicide out the way, the him being cheated on, yeah, out the way. I feel like he used to say this about his other partners as well. I can't really remember when they didn't. Maybe some of them did. I don't know. I feel like he used to complain to a lot of other people about this, because he sort of, do you get it when a narcissist looks at you and it's almost like they know that you know? So I think he sort of stopped telling me stuff, because he was like, oh, she knows this is a lie. He would lie about being alone on special occasions and stuff like that. So like Christmas, he would lie about being on his own all the time. And I remember one year, me and my mum weren't really getting on, but I just naturally would have spent Christmas with her, because that's what I've done. Like, I just always went with her, or I was, even when they were together, it was always like she was the one who done Christmas, like it was her thing. And my brain's gone. Yeah, Christmas. So he said to me really sad, he was like, I'm spending it on my own. So I was thinking, he wants me to spend Christmas with him. And then I said to my mum, I was like, sorry, I can't spend Christmas with you. I think I saw Christmas Eve or something. But I was like, sorry, I can't. Like, I'm going to spend it with Dad, because he's all on his own and I feel bad about it. So my mum actually spent it on her own with the dogs. And what had happened is, my dad didn't want that. I don't think my dad wanted that at all. He had not been with this partner very long, but he had planned to have Christmas dinner with them and not told me about it. I thought it was going to be a Christmas with me and him, because he said he was on his own, and I have intense anxiety, especially if I don't know people. It's not like I'm going to be so uncomfortable the whole time. I also have an undiagnosed chronic illness at the time, and that would be like triggered by stress, so I would be in pain. It was like a whole thing. So I was just like, oh, I don't really feel like going. I feel tired, because I just felt like this was meant to be our Christmas. And then he got kind of like arsy with me about that. And when I told my mum that I spent Christmas on my own, she couldn't believe it. He was also, sorry, my dog's looking really strange. Are you okay? He's winking, he's fine. Two secs. Okay, sorry about that, I'm back. Yeah, my dog was looking very strange and I didn't know what was going on. And he's got an ear that's inside out, so I'm still not really sure what he's doing. He's 14 years old, so I think he's just a bit confused. Yeah, and then years later, it was always, you could imagine my dad I think like a couple of years later, my dad was like, "Oh, I'm going to be spending it all on my own," and he tried it again with me, and I was just like, "Well, I'm not going to spend it with you because I actually don't like my mum spent it on her own because I planned the whole day with you to make it feel special, basically, and you left me." And he left me for like basically the whole day. In the end, he left for the dinner really early to be with his partner and her family, who I didn't know, and her child, and they didn't come back. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna be spending another Christmas with you. And he looked kind of like shocked that I'd called him out on that. And then a few years later, he had posted all over Facebook. I feel like he'd done this every year, told people, but it was like a bold move that he'd taken it to Facebook, right? And he had told everyone, "I'm spending Christmas on my own," and like he made a really big deal out of it. And he posted these pictures, and it was like of him smiling in like the woods near his house or something. But like it was almost like oh, look at me being a brave soldier on my own near Christmas. And his family had seen this and they thought, oh my gosh, why is he on his own? Why didn't he tell us he was on his own? We could have invited him over. Like, we are his family. And his one mistake was being so bold to post that on Facebook. And this is what I do kind of love about narcissists. They out themselves in the end, always, like unintentionally, because they're so obsessed with the attention. They just out themselves. And yeah, so my granddad, he had called the house to be like, "Steve, why are you on your own? What's happening? Like, happy Christmas, are you okay?" Like, I just try and make him feel like someone cared. And my brother picked up because my dad wasn't on his own. And yeah, my granddad was like, "Oh," so yeah, outed himself there. And I don't know if he's still pulling the same stuff because I don't know. He's had the same girlfriend for a long time, so maybe she knows what he's like. I don't know. I've not spoken to him in years, and I don't want to ever again. And then the last one, which is the one that will probably boil most people's blood, is he would tell people he had tumours, and he would tell people he had a brain tumour, and he would tell. I feel like he definitely did use the word cancer with other people. But yeah, so this started for me. This is when it started for me. I feel like he was telling people a long time before this, "I'm dying." But this is just me when I was really young, probably about 6, 7. He said, "I'm riddled with tumours." And I was like, oh my god. Like, I took that to mean he's dying. You know, I'm not a medical specialist. I'm a child. I have no knowledge about cancer. And he told me I'm riddled with tumours. I've got them all over me. And he did have like one lump. But yeah, and you could sort of see him smiling, almost like he knew that I thought he was dying and he was getting off on it. And I never really questioned it because I thought, oh, it can be quite a hard thing to deal with. Maybe other people aren't talking about this because they're struggling with coming to terms with it or whatever. Turns out the reason other people weren't talking about it was because he wasn't dying. And me as a child just thought he was. And then move forward to when I restart living with him after me and my mum have moved out when I was like 14, 15. I think I must have had to have been about 15, 16. But before this, he was always going on about his brain tumour. But then he had a hospital visit, and I don't know anything about really like asthma or anything, so let me know. But we were in like a unit for like where people who would like not be able to breathe properly, like, and would have asthma attacks, would go. Not even a ward. It was like, it wasn't like an A&E thing. It was just like people waiting to be seen, you know. So it wasn't like they would have died if they didn't see someone. Like it was an appointment thing. And yeah, and because I can't remember what the word was, but I was like, oh, what does that word mean? Because we were just in the waiting room. And he was like, oh, that means something about asthma. And I was like, oh. And he didn't expand why we were there, or if he had a brain tumour. And he was saying it's just there to check that everything was okay, and basically that he wasn't dying. And we came back, and I've missed out a huge chunk of this actually. We lived in a pub. He owned the pub. He was like the landlord. So obviously this is a narcissist's like love. He's got loads of attention because people are coming to him for drink. So he's like, I will tell my stories. And I would have thought that this is quite a personal story, but he didn't see it that way. He was telling everyone about how he has a tumour in his brain. He has a brain tumour. And people are like, oh, you're so brave. And they're all talking to him like he's dying. And I'm just there like, because when he came out, he was like, no, they told me everything was fine. I'm not dying. Nothing's grown. Nothing's changed. Or whatever. Which I still don't think we were there for that. I think he's even made up that he has a tumour. Because I think if he says he's got a tumour, then it gets found out that it's not cancerous. He can then be like, oh yeah, but I never said cancer. You know? But brain's gone funny again. What was I talking about? What was it? Yeah. And he was letting people believe that he had cancer basically in the pub, and he was telling people, and this man had came up to him. Like I just used to sort of sit there. I was awkward because really bad anxiety, but then he would tell everyone how selfish I was because I wouldn't spend time with him because I was terrified of people and really socially anxious. So a pub wasn't really the best place for me, but I had nowhere else to live at the time. Yeah. And this man had came up to him. So like I was sort of watching and I could overhear. He was like, oh, I've heard you've got, and he said cancer. I'm pretty sure he said cancer. And I was thinking, no, don't go along with this, Dad. He said cancer. You cannot lie. You cannot go along with this and be like, yes, I have cancer. And he was like, oh, I hear you've got a brain tumour. I hear you've got cancer. And my dad was like, yes, that's true. And he was like, oh, my brother had this. And I was like, oh my God. No, this is awful. This is so bad. He can't lie to someone who's lost someone to a brain tumour. He did. He was just like, oh yeah. But you could tell my dad was sort of like a bit flustered because he's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So they try and quiz me on it. I'm just gonna, yeah. I think I'm gonna leave it there. And those are the only ones I wrote out. Again, I could have written so many more and gave you so many different like little things that he's lied about, random things he didn't need to lie about, just, but yeah, I'll leave it at that because this has gone on quite a bit. So those are all the things that my malignant narcissistic father lied about, and it was embarrassing. Oh no, actually, sorry, I just need to say, because I completely forgotten to say this, or I think I just forgotten to say it. I've already sort of forgotten what I've said. My brother had come over to my mum, and he was really angry with my mum. And do you want to know why he was angry? Because he thought my mum didn't care that my dad was dying. My brother thought he was dying too. My brother was like an older teenager, and my dad had never told him this before. This was all new news to him, whereas he had been telling me this since I was a child, and he was still very healthy and hadn't gone through anything like chemotherapy or any hospital visits or anything. It was just all normal. Like, it was very obvious he didn't have a tumour or cancer. And yeah, so it was really quite, I feel a bit sorry for my brother. We don't get on, but he was very, he took the news really bad, and he was really upset. And obviously my brother was the golden child. He had no idea my dad was mental. My dad was crazy and would just lie about stuff for no reason. He didn't think that. He thought that everyone else was horrible to him, I was horrible to him, all this and that. So if we had gone, oh, he's not dying, he would have just gone and like had a go at us even more, and just thought that we were being really evil and cruel. So we couldn't even really explain it to him. Like, I think my mum was sort of like, oh, like, she's better with it than me. I would have been a lot more blunt, and then there probably would have been violence, and my brother would have taken my head off for saying it, because he had no idea what my dad was like. And yeah, I don't know when my brother realised my dad was fine. I don't think it would have been that long after, to be honest. Because my dad, there was a show called The Widower, and he really got into that. I have a feeling, am I remembering wrong? I think he like shaved his head and really like tried to make it look like, oh, I've been through chemo. No, my dad didn't get that deep into the lies. He would just lie and be like, everyone's forgotten that, right? But still give me sympathy for it, even though it was clearly not true. And my mum had gone on a date with someone. Well, a date friend that they got on, but they weren't like that romantic. And you know, they hadn't gone. Anyway, why am I talking about this? Nothing to do with what I'm talking about. They were on the date, and he lived near where my dad lived, because we lived in a different town to where my dad lived, but the person my mum was on a date with lived, I'm not sure if it was the same village or he just lived in the town near the village, but he was like, oh, I don't know how to tell you this. Your ex-husband is dying. And my mum was just sort of like, because he wasn't dying. And it was really embarrassing that men were coming up to her and being like, you should know your partner's dying. And she has to be careful how she reacts to this now, because again, it's like the other one. If you go, no, they're not, people look at you like you're cruel and evil, and they don't, you know, so you just sort of have to, and you have to be really careful. But then, yeah, I'm sure some people thought we went along with it. I don't know. But it was embarrassing. So I finally finished the stories. I'm going to stop here because I am rambling. If you have a narcissistic parent, what crazy stuff did they lie about? It would be really funny and interesting to hear about. Well, funny because it's crazy, but also it's not funny because at the time it's very distressing for yourself and everyone else around you. But still, tell me your stories if you feel like it. Yeah, I'll see you on my next video, whenever that is. I don't know why I've got a really dry clump of skin there. Ignore that. Bye.